Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Jossun's hate overflows in the gardens, leaving Meridia reeling and furious. Seemingly cut off in every direction, how will Meridia continue to follow her true objectives when she's been sentenced to day after day of mind-numbing work at the docks? Find out next on the Seventh Valkyrie. It was without her usual purpose that Meridia wandered home that evening, walking until the sun had long since set beneath the sea. At one point, she vaguely remembered numbly striding past the harbor where she'd be stationed. She watched the Mandarians firing the phosphor floodlights and massive torches for another night's work, which would soon become her day's work. In another time, she might have marveled at the tremendous expense it would have required to transplant this many men here, not to mention cost-prohibitive nighttime supplies. But instead of observing and analyzing and calculating, she just ambled away, back through the city without direction. She didn't pass by the Salty Lass, apart from a passing glance from a higher level. The bars were flooded with people like they'd been the night before, and after today, Meridia couldn't bring herself to face Greta this evening, not after putting a huge target on the woman's back. In time, Meridia finally returned home, where she ignored the salutations of Rem and Godin and a few other neighbors that were chatting on their front porch and heading inside. Once in her house, she hung her white cloak on its reverent perch in her bedroom. Even in the dark, it seemed to glow white, but it was no longer pristine. It was covered in the blood of the fight she'd gotten in, and she could feel the spit, even though she had washed it long away, as if it dripped all over her outfit. Meridia growled and returned to her desk to glance over the files she had painstakingly compiled on the Machine King. She flipped a few over, glancing at the notes, the reports, the pages that she knew proved his existence. It didn't matter whether he was a myth, a man, or a real monster hiding in the shadows. He was a threat to Edera. Maybe the biggest threat to Edera if the attacks were related, like the False Wolf had said. And while he ran free, she was stuck under Jossun's thumb. With a roar, she hurled a book of files at the wall, watching it slam into the heavy wood and scatter. Gritting her teeth, she did the same to the others waiting on her desk, each one at a time, scattering them to the corners of the room, knocking over vases and potted plants, and hurling two into the fireplace. It could all burn. Worthless kindling, that's what it was now. A picture that was already a year out of date, and with no way to follow the trail that was waiting just in front of their noses. She should have killed Jossun. She should have hurled him over the edge of the wall, called it an accident, and damn be the aftermath. Breathing heavily, she tried to calm herself, but her hands were shaking too hard, her vision practically crossing in rage. "Damn it!" she shouted, then bit her lip to silence anything else. She didn't want the others outside to hear her cries, and she would never let them see the tears of blind anger and frustration that had welled up in her. Fuck. Was that all she was? Just a teary-eyed woman, a weeping wench, better suited to serving soldiers than protecting her nation? A pair of old mugs rested on her desk, and she crushed the first one in her fist, picturing Jossun's head popping within her hand. It exploded with a clean break and left bleeding shards scattered throughout her palm, but the pain was grounding. She had felt pain before. Physical pain, emotional pain. She had overcome it then, and she would overcome it again. In her anger, she took the second and hurled it into the kitchen with all of her force. She hadn't been banned from training. She hadn't been banned from growing stronger, more effective. Jossun had cut her off now, but in a few weeks, Meridia's replacement would come, and she would walk once more towards the Machine King. Meridia laughed forcefully at herself. The Iron Wolf would never have let this stop him. Letting the shards of the mug fall to the floor and picking the rest out of her palm, she breathed out forcefully. Dinner was first. Then, she would train all night until the daytime came, and she would do that every single night and every spare minute until she could hunt the Machine King again. It would have taken months anyway. This was just preparing herself before she started. Jossun could make her work, but he could not make her work well, so she would use that work time for her sleep. The pieces were starting to come together. But as she entered the kitchen, already planning her meal and her routine for the next 8 hours, a thought flashed across her mind. She had not heard the second mug smash against the floor. Meridia caught a glimpse of the blue tint of a crossbow bolt and hurled herself to the side. The shot didn't come immediately, and she raced low along the outer wall of the kitchen, keeping the table between the two of them as she drew her knives and swept upwards towards the table. She would not be taken now. Not today. But as she stabbed down on the dark figure, she felt her 2 blades puncture thick cloth and then sandy flour. A decoy. Meridia felt 2 impossibly strong arms seize her, locking her shoulders and pressing against her neck as she was wrestled down to the floor. Cursing, thrashing, gurgling, Meridia choked as the blood went out from her, but she fought like hell, and then suddenly felt limp, playing dead. Her ruse didn't fool her attacker, though, whose arms tightened around her until she gagged a second time, this time for real, and was forced to feel the strength slowly leaving her body as her vision turned to black. The next few minutes were a jumble as Meridia tried to regain consciousness, desperately trying to fight as her weapons were removed from her. She was gagged, and then was finally placed, tied on a chair in the center of the kitchen. Even then, though, Meridia's eyes were alive, searching for any way out. Whatever happened today, she would not go down without a fight. Not here, not today. But as the candles came up around the room and the blood flow returned to her brain, she was met by the familiar figure of the false wolf, cradling a blue-tipped crossbow, sitting directly across from her, his sackman dummy still bleeding flour across the floor. "I just want to talk," he said, laying the crossbow across his lap. "This isn't a deadly poison, though. It will knock you the hell out from what I've seen it do to a Brinspore." Meridia thrashed and screamed through her gag, trying to force her wrists free, but only succeeded in tipping herself over onto the floor. With a loud sigh, the false wolf stood and walked over, and dragged her to the side of the table so that her head was facing him. He did not return her chair to a sitting position, instead making her look upside down at him. "If you're going to make a fuss like that, I'm gonna keep you right here," he said. "Look, I can tell you're pretty inventive, and I'd rather not get stabbed in the shoulder again, so I'm just gonna keep things like this, but like I said, I just want to talk." Meridia thrashed around some more and screamed at him through the gag, making the false wolf sigh again. "Well, I thought this might have had a chance to be a discussion, but I can tell you're not really in the mood for hearing me out, so I'll just get to it. I checked your notes. I looked through them. You and I have a common enemy, and I would like your help in finding him. I think you know who I'm talking about." "Kyrie Krona," Meridia responded, or at least tried to. Said it came out muffled. "Yeah, I think you got it. The Machine King. You may not have believed my story, but one part of it matters more than any other, and you can be very sure that it is true. The Machine King killed people very close to me, very important to me, and I'm going to slaughter him for it. I'm sure you heard the news, right? Even I got a handful of it. Raids all across the nation. Well, I heard the same earlier, and I saw the same, and when I tortured his men, they all said the same thing. The Machine King's men came from Reen, and it was the Machine King that sent them. So I'm not going to stop until the Machine King bleeds. No, I don't know your connection to him, but I do know a determined hunter when I see one. I'd hate to intrude. You seem pretty busy, and you seem to have made some progress, but... in fact, I hate that I'm here just as much as I hate the new Light Corps outfits, but I still have some trust and some respect for the Light Corps and the people in it. I know you wouldn't have gotten here if you weren't damn good and dedicated to serving your country. Meridia growled at him, and the false wolf rolled his eyes. What, are you still haven't forgiven me for pretending to be the Iron Wolf? I won't even get into that right now. Put it to the back of your head, because right now I have something you need, and based on your conversation with Jossun, you have something that I need, and I'm willing to trade you for it. Meridia was silent. Listening now. You weren't the only one up there in the gardens today. I heard the whole thing, and regardless of how stupid the High Commander's particular views on you are, you're stuck. A horde of Mandarians, eyes all over the city, and orders to do nothing but just work on the docks for you? Oh sure, even if you worked all the way through the night, you're too visible to sneak out from your office or your apartment. And you can be sure he'll have you watched. Well, I know his kind. Any challenge to their own power, and they won't stop until they've ground you into dust. So, for you, options are limited, at least for now. But me, well, I've already shown you that I can make it in and out of this city just fine without alerting the guards. And like it or not, I might just be the only person willing or even able to help you on this. Meridia grunted at him and wiggled against the restraints again. I'm right, aren't I? You don't strike me as the type to have many friends. But Lycor were kind of always like that. Meridia grunted again, but laid back. Yeah, that's what I thought. My plan is simple. Not all that different from the one you pitched to Jossun, just different people in different places. Now, you're tied up all day on the docks, and now you're probably one of the most watched people in the city. But I'm not. And what you do have is going to be access to every shipping manifest, every piece of information about who goes in and who goes out of this city. So you tell me where to go, who to break into, who to break, and in exchange you get a friend outside the Edarin law, someone who no one knows and no one can trace back to you. Meridia was silent. I've been to the old city, the false wolf said. I tracked him as far as I could, but the way I left it, well, I won't be going back soon without an army. The families are in turmoil, and with them on high alert, even I can't go in there alone. It's too risky. Not with them looking. But again, I read your notes, and if you're right, the Machine King has just as much sway on this side of the river as he does over there. So maybe we can make ourselves useful in a place where people can't smell me through the fucking walls. He looked down at her. Grunt twice if I'm making any sense, he said. Despite herself, Meridia grunted twice. Good. You and I share an enemy who's more dangerous than either of us, and if we're not quick to respond, innocent people may die. Am I right? Meridia grunted in agreement and frustration. Good. Now, I don't expect you to stop chasing me or to stop wanting to hunt me. Guess that's your job after all, but if you can find it somewhere deep down to work against a greater enemy, I guarantee you I'll be your best friend in this city until the Machine King answers for every soul he snuffed out. She growled again. I couldn't tell if that was a growl of agreement or anger at me for tying you up, he said. Maybe one day we can sit down for a nice chat and you won't try to turn me into spilled flour. He stood up. I'll keep searching in the way that I can, he said. But I'll need your help if this is going to work out. You've got an eye for the puzzles, the files, the documents, and you got access we need to start pulling in the strings. What's that you said to Jossun? Just make me your weapon. He may not have listened, but I hope that you can. He headed towards the door. I'll come visit you again soon, he said. If you have information for me then, I'll take it as we're working together. If not, well, don't bring any guards that you'd prefer to see again." And with that, he disappeared into the darkness, past the kitchen, and breezed out the back door without a sound, leaving Meridia still tied to the floor, bound and gagged. With a frustrated growl, Meridia began the long process of scooting over towards her knife to begin the process of untying herself. It was minutes later when she finally got free and sprinted out into the back garden, but, of course, the false wolf was long gone, leaving behind only his offer and the promise that he would return soon. Want to know what happens next? Join us on Patreon to become a hero of Edera and get early access to episodes along with bonus features, director's commentary, and the full Tab to archive. You can also find other ways to support us at the links in the description, and we will see you next week.